Well, hey everyone. My name is Travis. If I've not met you before, my name is Travis one more time. I'm the campus pastor for our Sertoma campus, and that was just a little bit embarrassing. But not only am I the campus pastor for our Sertoma campus of Embrace, I'm also a husband and a dad. My wife, Jessie, and I have a beautiful little girl. Her name is Parker Joanna Fink, and she is the sweetest, most beautiful girl you have ever seen in your life. We actually have proof. Here's a picture of my sweet PJ. Isn't she cute? She is 15 months old, and she, again, is absolutely beautiful. But the downside of PJ is that she is terrible at conflict resolution. Not just bad at it, she is horrible at conflict resolution. This Christmas, my wife, Jessie, and PJ and I, we all went to a family gathering in Minnesota, and while we were there, PJ was playing on the floor. She was reading a book because, again, she's so smart and she's so sweet. I think that she reads at like a third grade reading level. And so she was on the ground, she was reading this book when one of my cousin's kids walks over to PJ and just kind of snatches the book out of her hands like kids are prone to do at times. And thankfully at this point in PJ's life, she's actually still pretty patient. Like her mom and I can take stuff from her and she doesn't make a big deal about it. So she actually didn't make a big deal about it. She just kind of found another book and started reading that one as well. No conflict, we were good to go. Well, a couple of minutes later, that same kid comes back and she walks over to PJ and she takes PJ's new book right out of her hand. Here's a picture of the book thief. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to show you a picture of the book thief. But so this time, PJ, she started to whimper a little bit. She was a little bit mad that this kid kept stealing her reading material. But thankfully, Dad was nearby. I was nearby, honestly, just kind of watching in fascination about what was going to happen next in this altercation. But I was able to comfort her a little bit. I gave her another book. It's okay, sweetheart. You can just read this book instead. So she calms down. She starts to read the new book. Predictably, though, a couple of minutes later, as you might have guessed, the book thief returns. And this time there is a bit of a struggle. They pull back and forth on the book for a little while, but since this other kid is a little bit bigger than PJ, she eventually succeeds. She takes another book, and again, I'm just watching. You can call me a bad dad if you want. I'm not getting involved in this altercation. I just want to see what's going to happen next. Well, I wasn't disappointed. So PJ, she had had enough, but she didn't cry. She didn't even reach out for the other book, even though it was still nearby in the other kid's hand. Instead, what she did was she reached out and she grabbed a handful of the other kid's hair and ripped it out of her head. And then she just looked at the other girl, stone-faced, dead in the eyes, and proceeded to eat her hair in front of her. I have never been more terrified and proud of my daughter in my entire life. There's a lot of ways to show up another person, but eating their hair in front of them, that's got to be near the top of the list of things to do. Right? So say what you want. She's only 15 months old, blah, blah, blah. She is terrible at conflict resolution, and I can be too, and maybe you can be as well. So we're going to talk about conflict today. We're in a message series called You Complete Me, and the series is all about the things that we go to in our lives to complete us. Things like our job, things like our spouses, our friends, our family members that we go to complete us. And what we've learned, though, over the last couple of weeks, and what we know, even if we haven't been here the last couple of weeks, but have lived on this earth for a hot minute, is that these things that we go to, they can't actually complete us. Okay, we can go to them, we can rely on them, we can hope in them to complete us, but they actually can't. And what are we left with when they can't? Again, conflict. Conflict. And none of us are really neutral on conflict. All of us have feelings about conflict. Many of us, we don't like it. We do anything we can to avoid it. It gives us anxiety. Some of us understand the value of conflict. We need it to resolve things in our life. And some of us, more aggressive types, we actually enjoy conflict. But wherever we're at with conflict today, my hope and my prayer for each and every one of us is that we would walk out of our campuses and network churches and away from our screens online looking at conflict just a little bit differently. We can like it, we can hate it, we can avoid it, it can give us anxiety, but my hope and my prayer is that we would just look at it a little bit differently today. So I want to share a story from a guy named Matthew. If you have your Bible with you, you can turn to chapter 16 in the book of Matthew. But Matthew, he recounts this interaction that Jesus had with one of his friends named Peter. A little bit backstory. Jesus is talking to his friends, his disciples, and he's saying, hey, we've been traveling around a lot. We've been meeting a lot of different people. Who are these people? Who do they say that I am? Okay, we've been meeting all these people. Who are they saying that I am? And his friends, his disciples, they take a couple of stabs at it. They start to say, well, some of them say you're John the Baptist. Some of them say you're Elijah. Some of them say you're Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. And Jesus says, okay, cool. That's great that they think I'm that. What about you, though? You're the ones who know me best. You're the ones who are closest to me. Who do you say that I am? And this is actually probably a tough question for the disciples, but thankfully Peter is one of the disciples, and Peter is never afraid of a hard question. He is always willing to jump in. He's that guy, he's that friend that's always willing to speak up. So Peter, he decides to take a stab at this question as well, and here's what he says in verse 16. Simon Peter answered, well, you're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. So Peter, he takes a big swing here. He aims for the fences and he says, Jesus, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. And let's see if he gets the answer right. Going on to verse 17, Jesus replied, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You didn't learn it from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it, and I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. So I think that Peter, he got the right answer here because Jesus is jazzed up about this answer. He's like, Peter, you get it. You're blessed. God, he revealed this to you, who I really am. You know the truth, man. And on this truth and on the things that you know, I'm going to build my church. Here's the keys to the kingdom, Peter. You rock. Which is a really fun thing to say to Peter because his name actually means rock, which is cool of Jesus to say that. He didn't actually say that, but I think that he should have. Now, if I was charged with looking at this interaction and telling you what stage of the relationship Jesus and Peter are in right now, I would say that they are in the honeymoon phase. Without a doubt, they are in the honeymoon phase of their relationship. Peter, he said the right answer to Jesus' question. Peter rewards him in the perfect way. He honors him in the perfect way. They are good. They are in the honeymoon phase. And we have similar honeymoon phases in our lives as well, right? Like with our job, when we're in the honeymoon phase of our job, we're like, this job, it isn't like my last one. They really value me here. There's room for growth here. I love my new job. We say things in relationships like, hey, he's not like the rest of them. He actually cares. He actually listens to me. This guy, he could be the one for me. Or with our friends or with our family members, they're my people. They get me. They're the ones. The honeymoon phase, it's really the reason why we think that if we go to these things, friends, family, coworkers, jobs, all these different things, the honeymoon phase is the reason why we think that they can actually complete us. Because we've never had the perfect job before. So what if we find it? Maybe it can complete us. We've never had the perfect partner before. What if we find it? How do we know that that can't finally be the thing that completes us? Well, how we know is conflict. Because like a little girl lurking around the corner waiting to steal your favorite book, conflict is always around the corner. The honeymoon always ends, even for Jesus. Let's go on with our story here. This is just one verse later. From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead. But Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Heaven forbid, Lord, he said. This will never, ever happen to you. Let me stop right there. So Peter, he's hopping in again. Again, we love Peter. He's always willing to hop in and share his 2 cents. So he's a little bit riled up. He begins to reprimand Jesus. He says, never. This is a dumb idea, Jesus. I don't want you to be tortured. I don't want you to be beaten. This is a bad idea. Now, minutes ago, he just said you're the Son of God. You're the Messiah. You're the Savior. So maybe Jesus might know what he's talking about. But again, Peter wants to share his 2 cents. Let's see how this works out for Peter. Jesus turned to Peter and said, get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. Get away from me, Satan. Jesus and Peter, they are officially no longer in the honeymoon phase, and it did not last very long for them. Peter did or said something very, very wrong here. He overstepped in a huge way, and now the honeymoon phase is over, and in place of that, we have conflict. And this is actually incredibly important to note this, because if you don't know this, and you might, Jesus, he was actually perfect. Jesus lived about 33 years on this earth, and in that 33 years, he did not make one mistake. Not one time did he step out of line, not one time did he lose his cool, not one time did he make one mistake in 33 years, and that's important to know because this conflict, it took place within Jesus' 33 years of life. And what we can learn from that and why that's important to us, it tells us that because Jesus was perfect and he was a part of a conflict, we now know that conflict is not bad. We know that conflict is not evil. It's not sinister. There's nothing bad about it. It's just conflict. Jesus was in it, and he was perfect. This is really good news for those of us who have been avoiding conflict our entire life. We can all just start mixing it up now. Jesus was a part of it. But why? Why did this conflict happen? That's the most important question. What was this interaction all about? Again, I poke fun at people who want to avoid conflict, but the reality is none of us like conflict. None of us like conflict, and a lot of us, we don't just not like it. We'll do anything we can to avoid it. We'll stop going to work. We'll avoid family members. We'll avoid friends. We'll do anything we can to get away from this conflict in our life. So this fact that Jesus was involved in one, maybe we can learn something from it. Maybe based on how Jesus handles his conflict, maybe we can look at our conflicts just a little bit differently. So again, why did this conflict happen? Well, essentially, Jesus, he lays out God's plan for him to save the entire world. He says, hey, friends, here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to be beaten, I'm going to be tortured, I'm going to be hung on a cross, and I'm going to die. But the good news is 3 days later, I'm going to be raised back to life. I'm going to beat death. I'm going to defeat death. And as a result, I'm going to beat death for every single one of you as well. And if you believe that, you're going to spend eternity in heaven with God. This is really good news. And to that, Peter says, no, it's not. This is bad news. This is a dumb idea, bad plan. Jesus, I don't want you to be tortured. I don't want you to be beaten. I don't want you to die on a cross. You're my teacher. You're my leader. You're my protector. I don't want you going anywhere. Now, certainly, Peter, he doesn't understand the whole picture here, and that's not totally his fault, but that is the whole point. Peter, he only sees his plans for Jesus. He doesn't care about God's plans for Jesus. There's conflict here because Jesus does. Jesus knows that God's plans for his life are better than Peter's plans for his life, and he's going to tell Peter about it. As I study Jesus' life, I only fall in love with him more and more because he's so real. He's so human. He's so authentic. Think about this interaction. Get behind me, Satan. That sounds like a really harsh, rough thing for him to say to Peter, but he's only saying it because he feels this thing so deeply. He feels tempted by Peter's words. What does it say on here? You're seeing things from merely a human point of view, not from God's. Essentially, Jesus is saying, Peter, I'm tempted by what you're saying. Part of me doesn't want to get beaten. Part of me doesn't want to get tortured. Part of me doesn't want to die. Part of me wants to stay with you. Remember, I love you. I want to build my church with you. But don't go there with me, Peter. I know God's plans. They're better than yours. You want to tell me that this safe life with you is better than God's? I know the truth because I'm perfect. God's plans are better than yours. Get away from me. Get behind me. Get away from me, Satan. This conflict that they're in is all about Jesus understanding that Peter can't complete him and the truth that only God can. That's the root of this conflict, and it's actually the root of all conflict. Jesus knows that Peter, his friend, can't complete him, and he knows the truth that only God can. I said earlier that my hope and my prayer for us today is that we would start to look at conflict a little bit differently. This is what I'm talking about. Conflict, it isn't this big, scary thing that we need to avoid. It isn't this big, scary thing that we need to run from, and it isn't this big, important thing that we need to solve immediately because we think it's going to fix everything. Instead, what Jesus says is conflict is just an indicator. Let's have this light here just to illustrate my point. Conflict is just an indicator. It's a reminder. It's like a low fuel light in our car. It's just a simple, friendly reminder, hey, go get some gas. It's not a reminder like, hey, you just wrapped your car around the tree light, like some of us think conflict is. I don't even think they make lights like that. No, instead, it's just a reminder. It's just an indicator to think about conflict differently. So conflict, it doesn't have to be life or death. It doesn't have to be something that we solve immediately. It doesn't have to be something that we put off forever. But we do this with conflict. Think about a conflict that you're in right now. Think about a conflict that you're in. All of our campuses, network churches, think about a conflict that you're in right now. And my question for you is, why do you care about it so much? Why does it matter to you so much? Why does it give you so much anxiety? Why do you put so much pressure on it? Maybe for you, it's a conflict in your workplace. You and your boss can't get on the same page. You think you need a raise. You can't ever get fully staffed. Maybe that's your conflict. Maybe your conflict's at home with your spouse or with your significant other. They don't get you. They're not as nice as you'd like them to be. They say things that hurt your feelings. They don't help with the kids. Maybe it's with a family member or a friend. Maybe they did or said something to let you down. Here's what we think resolving these conflicts will do. If my boss and I could just get on the same page, my work life will be fixed. If my spouse and I, if my partner and I could just get on the same page, my married life would be fixed. If my friend or my family member would just apologize, if they would just value me a little bit more, if they would just get it, my relationships would be fixed. But here's the thing that Jesus knew that all of us don't. These conflicts, even getting the perfect resolution to them, cannot complete you. They're just an indicator. They're an indicator that these conflicts, they cannot complete you, and they're a reminder that only God can. And how we know this is because, again, the honeymoon period always ends. There's always conflict. With our friends, with our family members, with our coworkers, we never get there. We never get the answer that we want. We never get a complete, perfect resolution. And this may seem like some bad news to you, but it's actually really good news. And the bigger your conflict is, the more you care about it, the more you feel like is riding on your conflict, the better news this is for you. I want to tell you a practical example about this. So I decided to find one this week, and I started a conflict with my wife. Unintentionally, of course. I didn't intend to start a fight with her, but I did do it. So what happened was we were both feeling a little bit under the weather. We were both feeling a little bit sick this week, and unfortunately through the process, our daughter PJ got sick as well. So Jesse ended up having to stay home with PJ all day. I was feeling a little bit better, so I went to work. So that night I got home, and Jesse was a little bit crabby. We'll just put it that way. She had just been taking care of a baby who was sick all day, and she was sick herself. If you've ever done that before, you know that that's not very much fun. So she was a little bit crabby. So being the understanding, caring man that I am, I said to her, hey, honey, I really hope that you start feeling better soon because you're not being very pleasant to deal with right now. Nailed it. And as I was laying in the guest bedroom that night, I had an opportunity to think about this idea that conflict is just an indicator. We were both sick, we were both coughing, we were keeping each other up all night. That's why I was in the guest bedroom. She didn't kick me out of bed, at least I don't think that she did. But in that moment, I felt disrespected and unloved. I knew that she was sick. I knew that she wasn't feeling very well, but those were the feelings that I had inside of me. And you might be thinking, this is an exaggeration, this is just a silly story. But if you've ever been in a relationship, you know that just because it's not a really big conflict, it doesn't mean that it doesn't involve really big feelings. And what I felt like in this conflict is I felt underappreciated, unloved, and disrespected. Because when I get home from work, I want to talk to my wife. I want to tell her about my day. I want to hear about her day. I want to laugh together, have fun together, eat together, play with our kid together. But she didn't want to do any of those things with me. She didn't want to do any of those things with me. And as a result of that, I felt really unloved. And I wanted to say something to hurt her as well in the same way that I felt hurt. But as I laid in bed, I thought about this and what an unhelpful and unhealthy cycle this is. And I started to think, conflict is just an indicator. My wife cannot complete me. Being in conflict with her doesn't mean that she doesn't love me. It doesn't mean that she doesn't respect me. It doesn't mean that she doesn't appreciate me. It only means she can't complete me. And she wasn't meant to. And the same thing is true for you. If you're in a conflict with something you care deeply about, someone that you love and care deeply for, know that that conflict doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean you're not valuable to them. It doesn't mean they don't appreciate you. It only means that they cannot complete you and they weren't meant to. We think that resolving all of these conflicts will finally be the answer to the questions in our life. That will finally be the things that we will actually be completed by. But the fact that there's always another conflict around the corner, it's an indicator that it won't. It's a reminder that these things, even if we get the perfect answer to them, will not finally be the things that complete us. And viewing conflict like this, it takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure off of us to solve all the problems in our life. It takes the pressure off our spouses and our friends and our coworkers and our job to be the answer to every single thing in our life. And it puts the pressure back on the only one who can handle all of this pressure. And that, of course, is God. And a benefit of seeing conflict this way as just a simple indicator that we don't have to make such a big deal about is that we can finally calm down enough and we can get to a healthy place in our life where we can actually face these conflicts in a healthy way and we might actually start to resolve some of them. I'll close with this. We kind of sped past this part in the story of Jesus and Peter, but it's probably the most important part of the story, so I want to follow up on it. So again, Jesus and Peter, they're in conflict because Peter thinks that he has all the answers for Jesus, and Jesus knows that only God has the answers to him. But my question for us is, what if Jesus gave in? What if instead of saying, "Get away from me, Satan," Jesus said, "You're right, Peter. God's plans are never that reliable. Your plans seem a lot better than his. You complete me, Peter. Let's do this thing together." Now, Jesus, he of course would never do this, but you and I might. Jesus would never substitute the plans of God for the plans of a friend or a family member or a coworker. But you and I, we might. But we have to remember, God's plans for Jesus were huge. They were plans to redeem the entire world. God's plans for Jesus were so much bigger and so much better than Peter's plans for him. What if the same thing was true for you? What if you're so wrapped up in trying to solve all of your conflicts, solve all of your problems, that you don't even see God's bigger, better, more spectacular plan for your life? What if you've been missing it because you're so caught up in this conflict? What we have to know is that God, he just has something that our friends, our family members, and our coworkers and our jobs don't have. I'll paraphrase Isaiah 43 here. Here's what God says about you. He says, "I've called you by name and you're mine." He says, "When you pass through waters, I will be with you. Through rivers, and they won't sweep you away. When you walk through fire, you won't be burned. The flames are not going to consume you. You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you." The thing that God has that can actually complete us, that our friends, family members, and coworkers don't, is unconditional love. God loves you deeply, but not in this cliche, far away, oh, God loves me, yeah, kind of love. No, he says you're mine. He says you're mine. I know you deeply. You're precious to me. You're honored in my sight. I love you deeply. These flames, these conflicts, these things in your life that try to burn you, they're not burning you. They won't consume you. I'm with you. I'm by your side. These rivers, these waters in this life that are trying to sweep you away, they're not sweeping you anywhere. I got you. I'm your God. I love you. I will be with you forever. I will complete you because I love you no matter what. That's what God says to you, and that's what God says to me. And that's why we don't have to make such a big deal about our conflicts. They're not these life and death scary situations. They're just an indicator. They're just a simple reminder that the things and people in our lives, they cannot complete us, but a beautiful reminder that only God can, and he can because he loves you deeply and unconditionally. That's such good news for us. Let's thank God for that. Would you pray with me? God, thank you so much for the way that you love us. God, thank you that you love us deeply and unconditionally. Show us what it means that we're precious in your sight. Show us what it means that we're honored in front of you. God, you love us so deeply. Help us to view that love as a way that we can face anything. That we don't put too much pressure on the conflicts in our life, that we don't put too much pressure on being able to solve every single issue, but instead we put the pressure on you to complete us fully, to fill in every gap in our lives. Help us to believe that you can do that because, God, you can. You say that you can. You promise that you can, and you will. Lord, we love you. We thank you so much for being such a good, kind, and loving Father to us. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.